So I have to laugh. Who is the actual sex offender? It's hilarious. So lately, a number of us have been attacked across the country because of our advocacy efforts. I've already talked about that. But I want to tell the story of a woman and a man, actually, her husband, without mentioning his or her name. She's asked me not to do that. But this goes back quite a few years, and this particular person fought it for a very long time. And then I'll circle back around to talk about who the real offenders are. So, without giving extraneous details, there was a lady who had a husband in here in the central part of the state, and the young teen daughter of this family that they were very close to across the street. I needed some help getting something for, I think, cheerleading or something from the top shelf in the garage. So he went up there to help her. And she was a child who had an intellectual disability. And she got it into her head that it was a good idea for her to, well, I guess she started fantasizing about him. I don't know the full details of that. But I do know that it was something that she created in her mind. This is, again, according to the wife, it's second, third-hand information. So I'm sure the trolls will immediately say that it's not valid because, of course, their 15th-hand information, knowing nothing at all, is more valid. So in any event, he goes over and helps this woman, this young girl, excuse me, age 15. And in the process, excuse me, of helping her, she apparently starts fantasizing about him. And the next day, her parents come over very concerned. She's, told some stories before, but she claims that he touched her when he handed the box to her. Inappropriate. Well, this went to trial because apparently they felt they had to do the right thing and call the police. And both couples were okay with that. They were going to explain what happened and that the child had an issue. Well, of course, the police immediately jumped on this. So this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to go and attack this person and rack up their stats. And so they did. This man went to trial, and he was placed on the sex offender registry, though he had never, like many of us, who are caught on dating sites or in similar situations, we never had any predilection nor had any background of any kind of criminality whatsoever. The police don't care about that. In fact, they actually mention that as if it's some kind of a benefit that they caught you in time or something. But in fact, they have created the crime. Well, they did it here too. Again, no internet, just to give you an idea of where these so-called sex offenders come from. Well, both families were horrified about this, and they went to the judge and the prosecution, and the girl had recanted long before, and they didn't understand why her testimony would not have been used. And they refused to do anything. The judge refused to look at it. They refused to open the case. And again, I'm not exactly certain if she recanted after the case or before. I don't remember, because this story was told to me 8 or 9 years ago when I was fighting my own case, in which case she told me, "You're screwed," she said, because they don't care about any of these arguments. And she was absolutely right. It didn't matter if you were online or whatever, because she had long figured out, this is the wife, that the police are in there to look good and to rack up their stats, because they don't actually end up saving very many children, certainly not from these types of proactive stings or these types of setups, as in the case of the girl, the man in the garage. So we hear yesterday, going around the internet, Operation Flicker, which was a case, and I'll, again, circling back around here. So this man's destroyed. He just got off the sex offender registry a few years back. I think it was about 4 years ago. So Warp 2 today, yesterday, all over the internet, it had Operation Flicker, which was a Homeland Security operation against the Pentagon, because it was discovered that thousands of Pentagon employees, contractors, and others were file sharing not only pornography, but child pornography, commenting about it, okay? Openly sharing it, because remember, they're part of the government, so, they're the gatekeepers. They can do this sort of thing, just like we've seen with the Washington Post and with their Abused by the Badge series, where they used the Henry A. Wallace database at Bowling Green University to track a number of police officers who actually had non-consensual, manipulated, coerced sex, of the type they're trying to destroy in people like us. They, of course, got very light sentences, if they got any at all. Some were allowed to retire and collect their pensions, obviously. Whereas other public employees like myself, we had our pensions taken away. We have other cases here in Virginia where a man did something horrible. He raped a woman, not a woman, a young girl who was, I think, 15, and he just got 30 years in prison for it. Actually, he got 70 years, with all but 30 suspended. And if he survives, and I think he's somewhere in his, he's in his 20s or 30s, if he survives, he'll have another 40 years hanging over him. And certainly you might think, well, yes, he raped her when she was drunk, or rather he sexually assaulted her when she was drunk, and that's not cool on anybody's list. But 70 years, 30 years, I'm not so sure about that. Again, I only know the details I've read, and 30 years is not stopping this. Maybe he should be in a program to figure out why he had such an urge to do. Maybe that would help. But needless to say, he was certainly branded, and of course he is black. So there's something to be said there. If you read the Prison Policy Institute's statistics, or the Poverty Law Center statistics, you will find many black and brown people are hammered far more than people like me, and for far greater sentences. And mine was much, much less than many people, as I've said over and over again. But they are often not able to speak because they're under the boot of their probation officer, they're incarcerated, or worse. Somebody has to speak for what is actually happening to them. Because even if they did it or not, they deserve a little bit of a second chance, or at least be put in a position where they can earn money, pay taxes, and redeem themselves somewhat in society. Hilarious that the trolls keep saying they should be ground down to nothing, which is wonderful until something happens to somebody they know and they get informed on the issue, as only somebody can when it happens to them, and then suddenly they change their tune. Ask Riley Carter out in Washington State. A number of these guys are vigilantes and so-called pedo hunters, and they are actually engaging in a consciousness of guilt experiment in a way, because they're trying to assuage their guilt by going out and doing something to somebody else, and then turning around and immediately becoming the hunter of these people. We've seen it in Congress too. The many people who have trashed trans and gay people, bisexual people, happy to support any legislation to make their lives more difficult, only to find out later on that they themselves are gay, bisexual, and in some cases perhaps trans. That remains to be seen. Trans is just the latest attack avenue for them, instead of actually focusing on the things that we pay them for, like reducing inflation, reducing the price of groceries, and making our lives better. Instead, they're ready to pass in their latest budget a huge bill that will help transfer an enormous amount of wealth to the most wealthy in the United States by cutting programs such as Medicare and Medicaid for needy families, which helps us all, by the way, helps them get healthier, helps them get jobs, helps them keep alive, paying taxes and contributing to the communities. But a little bit off the topic here. So let's go back to the Abused by the Bad series, where almost 2,000 people in a 17-year study, about 8 a week of the police committed sexual offenses against children. And where is the outrage against that? Where is the outrage about ferreting this out in government? So here we are. We have Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the House and Chris Murphy, Connecticut senator, in the Senate, co-sponsoring, among others, Jared Moskowitz in the House, another Florida Democrat. And again, just because I say Democrat doesn't mean I'm slapping Democrats. They have shown themselves far better than Republicans, but not where it comes to matters of sex, because they all benefit on both sides of the aisle, grinding people who have been convicted of a sex offense, falsely or otherwise, into the dirt. So they have a bill that would reauthorize, expand, and enhance the 2008 PROTECT Act, which I've spoken about on this channel. And that act would allow ICAC, which had been the only aspect of PROTECT that had shown any kind of marumbas to crack down on any kind of crime. It would enhance it and provide greater protections against qualified immunity for cops. I'm sorry, for qualified immunity for cops, essentially. Cops would be able to be protected even more than they are today from any lawsuit charging that they are not that they can be prosecuted and cannot avoid qualified immunity. Qualified immunity, you'll recall, is a type of immunity that the Supreme Court pulled out of their backside, as well as absolute immunity. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that this exists, in which police officers are completely shielded if one of two factors are met. That is, no reasonable police officer would have done differently, or that, get this, it had never been prosecuted before, so you can't prosecute this. Okay? That's called the subjective and the objective evaluations or tests for whether qualified immunity applies. It's relatively ridiculous, but that's the way it is. So get this, who are the sex offenders? Who are they really? And don't forget the unregistered sex offenders, the people who actually have not yet been convicted. So you convict somebody like me and somebody like thousands of us for computer solicitation. It's called something different in each area of the country, but because they might, perhaps, maybe, possibly had been interested in having sex with a minor. In some cases, there's no sexual talk at all, as in my case. In other cases, there are people who goad these guys. They say, you're not really a teenager. You started out as an adult and you're just playing a game. Or they engage in sexual banter and role play. And that's turned into, you must be interested in having sex with a child. Even though role play in sexual games prior to coitus has long been a part of the American sexual experience. But need I say more? We now have an enhanced police force that gets a lot of kudos and a lot of money for cracking down on something that should be protected. And ignoring, as in the case of Carlos Rodriguez out in Washington State, utterly ignoring actual cries from actual children and refusing to conduct investigations of those because the proactive stings, the fake stings, the setups were so much more lucrative. It's appalling, folks. Get the facts. I urge you to write into your congressperson and ask them to change the PROTECT Act to specifically require cops to do not proactive stings on adult dating sites, but at least proactive stings where they have probable cause. and require them under all of these things to get a warrant, instead of trying to weaken the warrant requirements over and over again, whether it's for FISA or for other things, which are supposed to protect all of us. And again, trolls, remember, your time is coming. It's only a matter of time before somebody you love, as these expand over and over again, get caught in this. You think you're so clever. And I want to remind you that anytime you've ever been a victim of a practical joke and didn't see it coming, this can happen to you. This is Norman Michaelation for ICAC Unpacked, asking you, what's the sex offender? On the 16th day of February 2025. Have a good day.